Hi guys, welcome back to A Heart Poured Out. This is your first time. My name is Laura, so welcome. Heart Poured Out was created to uplift, encourage, and give hope. And today I'm actually going to be speaking on hearing the voice of God and the importance of having people in your life that hear the voice of God as well. This topic always makes me laugh because the first time I heard about hearing the voice of God was when I first got saved, and I was raised Catholic. I started going to a Christian church and started hearing people say, God told me this, or I heard God say this, whatever. And at first I was scared to pray and talk to God and ask him to speak to me, because I thought that he literally was going to speak to me like I was gonna hear this manly voice like, Laura, And so I used to be scared to pray by myself and ask God to speak to me, because I took it very literal. Yes, there is an audible voice, but I thought that that's how he was always going to speak to me, was through a manly voice, and that it was gonna scare me. And so I don't know if anybody else can relate to that. If when you first got saved, you thought that you were gonna hear a legit manly voice speaking to you. But it wasn't until I went to this women's Bible study that somebody started speaking on hearing the voice of God, and how you can hear his voice through, not hear his voice, but discerning his voice through scripture. Sometimes some people feel like God's highlighted something to them through a song, or spoken to them through an object, or through a friend, or through some kind of sign. Let's say somebody was praying for something, and they see a sign that says something in the context of an answer to their prayer. And I'm gonna get into that a little bit more, but just kind of to throw some things out there of different ways that God speaks to us. He speaks to us through everything and anything, if you're paying attention and if you're willing to hear him. But the most important thing, and the best way you can hear from God, is by reading his word. Just straight up, just reading the Bible. That's all truth. That's all things that he has said, or he has instructed to be said. And so more than anything, that should be our number one way of hearing from God, is through reading his word. And when you are filled with his word, then you're able to recognize when you hear it in your spirit, when you see something and it catches your eye and you think it's God. You're able to match it with what the word says. And so don't ever drift away from expecting to always hear from God through signs and miracles and all those things, because we have to remember there's scripture too that says, I think specifically in Moses, when he was doing all these signs and wonders, Jesus was doing that through him. The sorcerers and magicians were also doing those same signs. And so we can't drift away from always expecting to see a sign. We need to make sure that we're reading our words, seeing what God says, and being able to discern that way. But I just want to share with you guys a few different ways that God has spoken to me, and just also how important it is to have people in your life that also hear from God, and their obedience to that, and how that can trickle down to you. And there's this one story that I think of. Back when I first moved to Arizona, I was driving to work and I decided to go to Starbucks. And typically I just go through the drive-thru, and I wasn't up to date yet where you can just place your order on the app. Now I'm all about that. But anyways, I was driving, and God told me to go inside. And so I was just kind of okay, that's weird. I just kind of there was something in me that felt like I need to go inside, but I recognized that was God prompting me, that he was leading me. So I was okay. So I parked, I go inside, and I'm standing in line, and there's these EMTs in front of me, and I'm standing there, and then there's this guy standing behind me, and I heard God say, pay for his drink. And I was okay, but then I started thinking about it. I was well, God, what if he gets offended, And as soon as I started arguing with God, this man that God told me to buy a drink for says to me, he's like, "Excuse me, do you have $1?" And I was just like, I just looked at him and I kind of giggled because I was like, okay, God, now I see why you asked me to. He couldn't even pay for his drink, and so he was asking me, you know, to kind of make up the difference. And I just kind of sighed and chuckled, and I was like, you know, I was already gonna pay for your drink. And he was like, why? And I was like, well, because, like, I was like, you know how people in the drive-thru, sometimes they pay for the person behind them, and, you know, it becomes as, and so I just wanted to do that for you. I was like, but we're in the store, so I was gonna ask you if I can pay for your drink. And he was just like, I have change I can give you. And I was like, no, it's okay. I can, you know, I got it. And so he was like, thank you so much. And, you know, that just kind of opened up some dialogue for us to talk. He was in town from California, and I was like, oh, I'm from California. And we just kind of talked, and I was just able to, in that moment, be an extension of Christ, you know? And I don't know what he was going through. I didn't know what he was dealing with. But it's just like, had I not listened to the voice of God, and had I not been obedient, I would have been robbing him from a blessing. You know what I mean? I mean, he was bold enough to ask me for, you know, money to make up the difference. But the fact that, that's besides the fact though. It's, the point is that, like, I need to be obedient even in those small things, you know? There's scripture that says that if God can trust you with little, then he'll be able to trust you with much. And the thing is that if he can't even trust you to give somebody a hug, maybe he tells you, go give that person a hug, and that's all you need to do. If you're not able to be obedient with that small thing, you really think he's gonna trust you to give somebody this extravagant word? You know, oftentimes we want God to use us. We want him to, you know, speak through us. We want him to speak to us about, you know, what it is that he wants us to do, but yet we're not even able to be obedient in the small things. So that's just one example of, like, when I heard, you know, from God. Another way that something that happened is that, and speaking on, so I'm going to share about when I, you know, when I felt like God was telling me to move to California, move back to California when I was living in Arizona. He spoke to me in multiple ways, and he knew, and I told God, I was like, you know, if this is you, like, you're gonna have to confirm it many ways, because I wanted to make sure that this wasn't my emotions, that I was really hearing from God, that I was really being obedient to him and being led by the Spirit and not led by my emotions. So it was kind of like a time frame and of, like, different things that were happening. But once I had a dream, and that's the major way for me personally that God speaks to me, is through dreams and visions. And I just remember having this dream once. My friends that I was doing ministry with in California, or in Arizona, we were at some kind of like arcade type thing, and then I wasn't wearing, like, the proper attire, I guess, to play whatever it is that we were going to play. And so I went into, like, the souvenir shop, and, you know, I go to change my pants, like, into pants or something. But there's people walking by, and the fitting room was some type of like bird cage, you know, like those old school, I don't know if you guys ever watched, like, Looney Tunes and stuff with Tweety Bird, you know, he had, like, the little cage that was, like, wired, you know, you can see through the gaps. It was kind of this thing like that, made out of bamboo sticks, and you could see through the gaps, you know. And so I was trying to change, but people were, like, watching me, so my friends, like, stood in front of me and, like, covered for me, and I changed. And then as I was changing, somebody had came by, and they looked at me and my friend, and they were like, it's time for you to go, it's time for you to leave. And I kind of looked like, what? And my friend looked at me, and she was like, she started crying, and she was like, yeah, they're right, it's time for you to go, that's just confirmation. And so she held my hands and prayed with me. And I woke up out of the dream, and I was just like, okay, like, that was weird, you know. And, like, I felt like that was a prophetic dream of God telling me that it was time to go, but I wasn't sure if it meant it was time to go, because initially when I moved to Arizona, I moved because God had told me to go pour into their ministry. And so I thought that maybe in that moment, God meant it was time to leave, the church I was currently at. It was time to just leave that ministry. So I wasn't sure, so I kind of prayed about it. So I was like, okay, God, like, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know exactly what you mean, but I'm just going to pray about it, and just kind of prepare myself. And the only thing that gave me a timeline or a time frame of what that looked like was that in the dream, their daughters, seeing the age that they were at, I knew it was soon. So that was kind of something that like I picked up and like paid attention to. And so after that, I just kind of left it on the back burner, went on about my life. And one day, I was getting ready before going to church. A friend was going to meet me at the house and at my house. And as I'm getting ready, I was telling the Lord, because this is a friend that she's just super prophetic. She's just an amazing woman of God. And so every time she'd come to my house, she would always find a heart-shaped rock. And, that has its own significant meaning to me because of, some other things that's between me and God. And this time I remember talking to God and telling him, I'm like, God, I wonder what kind of rock she's going to have for me. Knowing dang well every time it's a heart-shaped rock, so why am I even asking what kind of rock? And so my friend comes over. I open the door and she's just like, oh my gosh, wait till you see the rock I have for you. And I'm like, dude, I was just talking to God about this, And so she gives me the rock and I'm kind of looking at it like, okay, what is it? And she like flips it around and, hands it to me. She's like, look at it. Y'all, this rock looked just like California. And I just felt something in my spirit and I just started to cry. I still didn't really know at that moment what that meant, but I knew I felt it in my spirit and that God was speaking to me through that. In the moment, I felt that God was giving me a promise that eventually I'd be able to move back to California and be with my family. But I wasn't sure, but I just gave her a hug and I was just so thankful that she was obedient, It might have sounded so silly. I can only imagine for God to tell you like, okay, look for, like, because I asked her, I'm like, how'd you even find that? Like, you know what I mean? And she was like, I just was walking and I found your heart-shaped rock that I always find, and the Lord told me, keep looking. Once you see it, you'll know and I'll tell you. And so she was just looking around and God pointed one out and was like, that's it. And she picked it up and she was just like, the Lord told me to give you this, And so it sounds silly, but it had such a huge impact. And so I'll post a picture of the rock after the video, at the end, so you guys can see it, because it is mind-blowing. I'm just like, how does this even happen? Like, it literally looks exactly like California. It's the craziest thing. But anyway, from then, because I knew the dream that I had before, but then I remembered thinking back that I had a different friend that she told me, she's like, oh my gosh, she's like, I just feel like I need to tell you this. She's like, I had these two crazy dreams like back to back, and long story short, like her and her husband were supposed to be moving, and she was like looking for me to tell me and update me and let me know that they're going to be leaving, and come to find out I was moving with them, and moving with them specifically to California. I was kind of like, why the heck is California popping up? Like, so this is kind of the second time now that California had popped up. But then also I remember the dream that I had about me and my friends, and the person coming by and telling me that it was time to go. So at that moment I was like, okay, God, like, I need to pray about this. I need to see, like, okay, is this you? Like, and so what exactly are you telling me? Because again, I want to make sure it wasn't my emotions. I want to make sure I was being led by God. So after that, I came home to visit, came to California to visit. And I told God, I was like, God, you're going to have to confirm this for me. I had a lot of concerns because cost of living in California is super expensive. The pay isn't as good as, out there. There was just like a lot of different things I was concerned about. And I really felt, and I told God, I was like, look, someone's gonna have to say something to me, like, you're gonna have to pull all the works, you know? And so, being out here that, like that, week that I was here, there was just things that people would say that it's like, they had no idea I've been praying about this, you know? And, I had a friend specifically, call me one day after service, and we were just talking, and out of nowhere says, did the Lord tell you to move back? And I was like, what? And he goes, did the Lord tell you to move back? And I was just like, why? And they're like, I'm just asking. And I just like wanted to cry, because I'm like, this person had no idea I'd been praying about this. And I was like, honestly, yeah, I think so, you know? And so it was just one of those things that I'm like, they just had no idea, and they weren't, you know, expecting, because I talked to them afterwards. I'm like, what made you say that, you know? And they're like, it literally came out of nowhere. And I'm just like, I really believe that was Holy Spirit, you know? And this is a, like, you know, man of God. So I trusted that, you know, that what he was saying was being very spirit led, you know? And so I was just like, what the heck, like, you know? And so there's just different concerns that I had that in that trip, I felt like God like eliminated. It was like, see, it's not a concern, it's not a concern, it's not a concern. And so from then on, I was just like, okay, you know what? Like, I'm gonna take a leap of faith, and I'm gonna just go for it, you know? So I started kind of, in a sense, planning for it. And then after that, you know, things just kind of falling into place. And so through that, I'm just so thankful that I have people in my life that also hear from God, and that are obedient and don't care about stepping out and doing the crazy things, doing the weird things. Like I said, if God can trust you with those little things, he can do a lot. You know, it's like, if he's able to trust you with that, he knows he'll be able to trust you with more. So if you don't know how to hear the voice of God or how God speaks to you, just pay attention, you know. Sometimes he'll speak to me through a song. There was a time that I was sleeping, and this was when I was living by myself in Arizona. I was sleeping, and when I was laying down, I like felt something kind of like graze me through my neck, and I wasn't sure if it was like some kind of breeze, or like I just felt something, and I woke up like ready to fight. I was like, Jesus, like, you know, I'm like, I don't know who in here, but I'm ready, you know. And so, I mean, I obviously didn't see anything, but like I wasn't scared, but I woke up kind of like ready, you know, because you just never know. And so in that moment, I fell back asleep, and I was like, man, like, I wonder if that was some kind of like spiritual warfare, you know? I wonder if that was some kind of like spirit that God just fought on my behalf. And I started thinking, I was like, man, like, I wonder how many battles like God fights for us on our behalf that we aren't even aware of, you know? Like, all these things that happen in the spirit realm that we have no idea about. It's like, I have no idea if that was some kind of like evil spirit trying to get me, or I don't know, whatever, you know. But it's like, I don't know if there was an evil spirit near me that God just ended up fighting, and all I felt was like the breeze, like, you know. And then that morning, the song "This Is How I Fight My Battles" came on. And then that day when I got to work, I was scrolling through Instagram, and I saw this pastor, and he was standing there, and his whole congregation was reaching their hands out to him. And what he said in the caption was, "This is how I fight my battles." And then later that day, I went to YouTube to listen to a sermon while I worked, and the first video I see is the song "This Is How I Fight My Battles." I was like, okay, God, like, you're definitely trying to tell me that you were fighting a battle for me, you know. And it's just like me constant, and that song just says, "This is how I fight my battles. I may be surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you." And so it's just such a beautiful picture of like, yeah, like, you know, I may look surrounded by my situations, by everything that's going on, but even I feel like in the spirit realm, like, we have no idea of all these evil things that are coming after us, but God is constantly fighting on our behalf. So it's like, just stay seeking God, just stay in his word, just stay in alignment with him. And it's like, he got you, you know. He's came through for me one too many times, and I'm just so thankful. And so You know, it's like I'm gonna continue to seek him, I'm gonna continue to be obedient, and just, you know, at the end of the day, practicing, you know, hearing the voice of God. If you, you know, feel that God's told you to, you know, tell somebody something, I encourage you to just step out in faith and just do it. That's how you'll learn if it's God. Because, like, let's say, you know, God told you to tell somebody something and you tell them, and let's say you were wrong. Okay, now next time I know that wasn't God. But if I step out and I tell you something and it's confirmation for you somehow, then it's like, okay, so you start to recognize like what is and what isn't, you know, kind of thing. It's kind of like that process of elimination. Like, okay, that was just me and my thought, or that was just, you know. But at the end of the day, like, if you look at it, it's not my job to be right, but it's my job to be obedient and deliver whatever it is that I have to say with grace and with love. And if it's encouraging and it speaks life over someone, then more than likely it's, you know, it's from God. Because again, does it align with what the word says? Does it align with the truth of God? Are you doing it to encourage someone? Are you doing it like, you know? And so that's just one of the things. If you're learning to step out, you know, one, just know that it's like God gives us grace, and at the end of the day, like, if you're stepping out in faith, God honors that. He'd rather you step out in faith and be wrong than to be stagnant and not step out at all. And again, there's grace for that. That covers that. If you're wrong, then okay, just keep it moving, you know? And so I've learned to, whenever, you know, I believe that it's God, you know, I just step out and I'm just like, look, I don't know if this means anything to you, but I truly believe that this is what God's, you know, telling me. You know, I pray that that helps you. But at the end of the day, it's like I'd rather step out and be wrong than to not step out and rob somebody from a blessing. You know, it's like you just never know what that can do. You know, if somebody pops into your mind, that's God placing them on your heart. So reach out to them. You know, it's like you just never know. Even if you don't have a specific word for them, just be like, hey, I'm thinking of you, love you, have a great day. That's it. Sometimes it's just nice to know somebody's thinking of you. So, you know, don't make too much of it. Don't expect it to be this big old thing. Sometimes you might just think of someone, you might just think of something. You know, he could be leading you to do something versus like, you know, talking to someone. But it's just one of those things that it's like, it's in the small things. So once he trusts you with those small things, he'll trust you with the bigger things. But I hope this helped you guys. Hope it gave you a little laugh of how I hear from God, or how I thought I was going to hear from God. I was scared. But now it's just, you know, I try to find him in everything. I try and find him in, you know, everything that I do, and just practicing. You know, practice makes perfect. And we're never going to be perfect. We're never going to get it down. But just practice. Just step out in faith and just trust that he's leading you. The more you get in your word, the more you grow in him, the more you seek him, the more you worship him, the more you pray with him. You know, he'll lead you. Sometimes during prayer, like, I feel like he'll sneak in people in my prayer time. It's like, oh, where are they comfortable? Okay, let me pray for them. Like, you know, and that could be another thing. Sometimes you're thinking of someone and it could just be God placing them on your heart for you to pray for them. I know there's been times where, like, I've woken up out of sleeping and, you know, there's somebody in my heart and I just pray for them until I fall back asleep. So yeah, that's just some of the many ways that God speaks to us. I hope that, again, I hope that this helped you, that this encouraged you. And I just want to say thank you to all my viewers, all my followers, all my subscribers. I love and appreciate you guys so much. I appreciate all those people that have reached out and checked in on me. This season has just been a really hard season for me, just kind of getting into a rhythm of things, with everything being new in my life. It's been a little hard, but I'm here. I'm pushing through, guys. Pray for me. I'm really excited. I've been, you know, even though I've been a little MIA, I've been kind of working on some things behind the scenes, kind of brewing some things up. So stay tuned. I have some exciting stuff coming. Just again, keep me in prayer. And also, if you need prayer, if you have any questions, if you have any, you know, ideas that you're wanting to, or not ideas, but topics you want me to speak on, please reach out. At the end of the day, I want to make sure that I'm catering to you guys and, you know, pouring into your guys' life. So yeah, just reach out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. If this is your first time, welcome to the family. Love you guys. Have a good day. Bye.